At ThreatSpike, we essentially provide two main services. One is ThreatSpike Blue, which is essentially all of the security products and solutions that a company needs in order to be secure. So rather than going out and buying lots of separate products, we can actually provide it as a single platform and a single service to our customers. Then we have ThreatSpike Red, which is unlimited subscription-based penetration testing. So again, rather than focusing on day rate-based testing, we actually provide testing all year round, as much as the customer needs, whatever types of testing they require, all as part of a fixed price subscription model. When I was a consultant, I was actually able to get experience and exposure and really see firsthand how companies, which were very large, so we'd be talking companies between 30,000 to 100,000 employees, working across banking, retailers, manufacturing, industries like this. And what they had gone out and done is essentially follow that kind of concept of buying best in breed. So they would go out and they would buy the best proxy servers, they would buy the best anti-malware gateways, best intrusion detection solutions, and then take all of the logs from those different solutions and then try to feed it into a SIEM tool, which was essentially then try to actually correlate the information together to distill all of that information that's being collected down into kind of meaningful alerts, which a SOC then operate on. The really interesting thing is while the model sounds really good, it wasn't really very effective. And this was kind of partly down to the fact that all of these different components are all created in isolation. So what would actually happen is that they would go out, they would get these different products, there would be different versions of software on different installations, even in the same organization. They would then pick out any type of information that they thought was relevant. So your proxy server would go and it would log what kind of requests are being made, HTTP requests, but it would pick and choose based on its own criteria as to what information would then be sent through to the SIM solution. And it was the same with every single component. So not only did they have this issue where the quality of the data just wasn't there a lot of the time. So rather than kind of working it backwards and saying, what do we need in order to detect threats? It was more the opposite way around. We've got all this information coming in. What can we actually do with that information? And so the problem was a bit backwards. And it was not just that, but it was also the fact that they then had to keep this really complicated system with all this kind of orchestration and integration. It had to kind of be, it was this engine which had to essentially be maintained over time. And what you would do is you would come in one day and you would find that these different integrations had broken overnight, that the information being pushed around the organization had grown due to something that happened. It was now too much. It was stressing the SIM solution. Maybe the connectors had broken, all kinds of things. It was just, there was a crazy amount of maintenance that had to go into all of it. And because that's not a vendor who's supplying this as a solution, it was the customer's job to ultimately maintain that solution. And then it was the customer's job to get something useful out of it. And they would pass all these alerts over to their SOC team. And of course, the SOC team themselves would need to be trained up to understand what to do with these different alert types and how to respond to it. And so it's quite interesting because the work was on the customer side. It wasn't on the vendor side. And I think that problem still remains a lot today, where you've got vendors who are producing lots of different tools and companies are buying lots of different tools, but ultimately the results are on them entirely, on the customer. The customer has to work very, very hard and have the right expertise, the right time, the right management of these different solutions in order to get something meaningful out of it. And I think that's the bit where everything breaks down. So when you talk about attacking an organization, the thing is that organizations are very large. So, for example, there are cases where very high-profile organizations have been hacked because somebody was able to gain access to the VPN using, say, a compromised account. And then they were then able to find passwords just sitting in text files on a file share, which is obviously incredibly bad practice. But equally, you have problems where you've got a lot of infrastructure that needs to be patched. It needs to be maintained. You've got different content management systems which are facing the internet. They get breached. You've got the problem of people bringing in devices into the organization which actually have uh, managed to get malware installed on them. You've got phishing attacks where there is access that's being gained to people's Teams accounts, their Microsoft accounts, and then being used to internally phish other users. And the attack surface of these organizations is huge. So it's not that there's a single thing that they need to be doing. The problem is that they kind of need to be doing a lot of things, and they need to be doing it consistently across the entire infrastructure. If you even have a gap, and so if we take I remember a case with a company in the UK where they had a test server facing the internet. The thing is that test server had been put on the internet by somebody in the development team who probably thought it was quite convenient to do the testing like that. And the problem is that that test server got hacked, and then the attacker was then able to move from that test environment through to the production environment due to a lack of segregation, and they were then able to then kind of extend the attack, and that turned into ransomware. And again, like from the outside, when these threat actors say that they've ransomed the company, we don't really know the extent of which they've ransomed that company. It could be just a test environment, for example, but the optics at that point are really, really bad. And so it's really, really important that companies of any size be able to consistently implement a high quality set of security controls and a high quality monitoring across the entire environment, and they make sure that it's consistent. It doesn't matter if they've acquired a new company, it doesn't matter if they're growing organically, it doesn't matter if they have different subsidiaries over the world. They need that consistent level of security. Otherwise, the attacker will find the weakest point and they will get in there. It is quite interesting that every time somebody has a new idea in security, they always seem to set up a new company. So it's a case of the if, for example, you take a phishing attack, it seems very simple, right? So there's a phishing attack. What do we need to stop it? Well, it could be, for example, an email security gateway that could actually then go and stop an email coming in which contains phishing in it. Now, the problem is that people actually get phished by a completely different means. So not only do they get phished through email, but they might actually receive a message on their WhatsApp account. They might log on to their personal email, for example, and actually get phished through that. And so the problem is that these are all in the eyes of the vendors, these are all different solutions. And then what you'll have is that there'll be a company for email security, there'll be a company for WhatsApp security, there'll be a company who's then protecting you against personal email problems, and that could be CASB in that case. I mean, that could be there's just a multitude of all these different acronyms and different solutions that have been pushed into the market. And so it is an incredible large amount of noise. You think that you're securing your enterprise. You could come in, you could do an assessment of what exists in the market today. You could install all of those different solutions into your environment. And then next year, there'll be a brand new area, a brand new three letter acronym, which you're not doing, which you then need to go and apparently buy another solution and install it in and, integrate that into your existing stack. That's where it gets really, really hard to actually achieve meaningful, high quality results when you have a fixed budget, you only have a certain amount of time. And so I think it's really important that companies out there, they pick vendors who are thinking more holistically. So they're thinking of the entire problem space and they're coming out with different solutions in those spaces in order to address customer concerns. So, for example, when there is a new concern, what they're doing is they're updating their existing suite of solutions. They're not making it a whole nother area, a whole nother product, another upsell for the customer. And then only at that point can there be a meaningful relationship between the vendor and the customers, and can customers cut out all of that noise and just focus on the results. I think that there are very few vendors who are thinking strategically at the moment. There's a lot of change constantly that's happening within the industry. So there's obviously the augmentation of AI is coming in; it's making its way into everybody's everyday lives. There's lots of change within the security landscape. There's we can see in the recent months that there's been an uptick in the number of successful attacks that are happening. And it's really important that companies look at what actually generates real world results. Forget the marketing, forget the magic quadrants, I would say, even of this world, and actually just look at these different vendors, look at these different solutions and try working with them. Actually run proof of values, think about how much value that vendor is bringing into your life. Are they making your life easier, or are they making your life harder? Are they thinking strategically, or are they just trying to make a sale? Will they be a true partner to you as a company, or are you never going to hear about them after you've transacted with them? And so I think it's really, really important that companies start really focusing on working with the right vendors, the right suppliers, because only at that point will they be safe against future attacks.